My name is Carrie Thompson. I'm 31, and I make my living under trucks. Union shop, diesel engines, the kind that rattle your bones when they wake. It's honest work, and it leaves grease in the lines of my palms, no matter how much orange scrub I use. On Sundays, the grease gives way to gravy, my mother's pot roast day, and the whole Thompson clan piles into the little house on Maple with the uneven porch and the wind chimes that tinkle even when there's no wind at all. Tonight, it wasn't just us. Tonight, I brought my boyfriend, Nathan Reed, 29, pharmaceutical sales, smooth shoes, and smoother voice. Nathan grew up 3 exits and a tax bracket away. His father, Richard, runs a medical supply company. Their holiday card looks like stock photography for legacy wealth. Ours looks like a casserole with 4 spoons stuck in it while someone shouts for Aunt Jo to stop blocking the shot. Mom spent 2 days cooking for this dinner. New placemats, napkins folded like little church fans, the pot roast pulled from the oven with a proud flourish. Dad had his good flannel on and his hair combed back with water like it might behave tonight. My brother Mason argued with the football game even though the sound was off. My sister Abby set out homemade rolls, one eye on the timer, one eye on Nathan like she was trying to decide if he had a sense of humor. Nathan arrived with a bouquet that didn't match any vase we own and a bottle of wine my dad pretended to recognize. He was perfectly polite, perfectly gracious, and just a little too shiny for a room full of people who treat a ceiling fan with 2 speeds like a privilege. We said grace. Plates were passed. Steam rose off mashed potatoes like breath on a winter day. Mom smiled at Nathan like she was willing it to be easy, to be good, to be family. It wasn't the food or the talking that tipped me off. It was the tension under Nathan's smile, the way his eyes kept skating off the chipped edge of a serving bowl like it might cut him. He asked my dad about trucking routes as if they were a curious artifact. He told Mom the house was cozy, lingered a little too long on the word. Abby told a story about a patient who thanked her by crocheting a lopsided potholder, and everyone laughed. Nathan laughed too, in the right places, but he checked his phone each time the laughter rose. Mom glided around the table like a planet with her own gravity. More potatoes, more beans, more gravy, baby. I watched Nathan's posture stiffen at the family-style bowls, like plates at his dinners at home come pre-arranged and pre-approved. My Aunt Jo, who grows tomatoes like they're a personal calling, launched into her yearly triumph. The ones as big as softballs, the county fair entry, the neighbor who swore she was using Miracle Grow plus prayers. While she talked, my phone buzzed on my thigh. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. From Nathan, your family is so low class. It wasn't even dressed up. No emojis, no jokey LOL, just naked, plain, and mean. The room kept moving. Forks, breath, Aunt Jo's tomato sermon. Inside me, everything dropped, 3 floors, and splashed cold up my ribs. I read it twice, 3 times to make sure I wasn't reading what I feared. The words didn't change. A second buzz. How much longer do we have to stay? Another. Can we leave soon? I'm dying here. Another. Your mom's cooking is so heavy. I feel sick. One more. Next time we host at a restaurant. I took screenshots one by one, my fingertips steady, while the rest of me wasn't. I could feel the heat rise under my skin, the kind of heat that turns people loud, that makes scenes. But my mother's voice threaded the space between us all. Carrie, pass the rolls, sweetheart. And I thought of her ironing that tablecloth this afternoon like it would change something about our lives. I set the phone face down. In my family, we don't fight in the kitchen. We wash hands, we wash dishes, we take the hard parts to the backyard where the air can carry it off. I'm my mother's daughter. Nathan's knee bumped mine under the table. He didn't look at me, but I felt the expectation coming off him like cologne, like he was waiting for me to absolve him with a wink. I get it, babe. They're not our people. But they are my people. They built me, brick by brick, with pot roast and overtime and secondhand winter coats and stories we've told too many times because repetition is how you keep love from evaporating. I reached for my water glass. My hands weren't shaking. I realized that was scarier than if they were. Be right back, I said, light as a napkin. Left something in the truck. The late autumn air outside smelled like wet leaves and exhaust from the cul-de-sac. The truck sat under the streetlight like a loyal dog. I opened the driver's door anyway, in case any face watching from the window needed the alibi. I unlocked my phone. The screenshots stared back, small and damning. I opened a new message and attached them all. To Richard Reed, He'd given me his number the night Nathan first took me to their house, when the dining room table was wide as a runway and the dishes arrived like choreography. Richard had said, "If you ever need anything, Carrie." And there'd been warmth in it, I believed. Some fathers are drafts that never quite close. Richard felt like a door that shuts with finality. I typed, "Richard, this is Carrie. Your son and I are at dinner with my family. My mom spent 2 days cooking to welcome him. These are the messages he's sending me from across the table. I thought you should know how he speaks about people who open their home to him." I read it 3 times, not angry, just true. I hit send. The little bar crept until delivered bloomed at the bottom. I tucked the cold phone into my back pocket and looked at my reflection in the truck window. Hair pulled back, mascara holding, a woman who fixes engines because she likes the way problems tell you exactly where they hurt if you listen. Some problems are cylinders, some are character. I breathed once, twice, and went back inside. The warmth hit me like a quilt. Kitchen light, the thrum of conversation, the shiver of the wind chimes through the open window. I slid into my chair. Nathan's eyes flicked to me, question perched on his tongue. "Forgot what you needed?" he asked, voice low. "Didn't need it after all," I said, and reached for the green beans. He studied me like he was waiting for an explosion that didn't come. It didn't. It wouldn't. I fed myself one forkful at a time and let Aunt Jo finish her tomato miracle. Mom topped off Dad's iced tea. Abby asked Nathan about his latest sales territory, and he answered automatically, the way a person does when they are mostly thinking about themselves. He checked his phone. His face drained like someone had pulled a plug at the base of his throat. "Everything okay?" Mom asked softly, because she asks softly, even when she's about to tell you to take off your muddy boots. "Work," Nathan said. His voice tried to be casual and landed somewhere brittle. "Just work." He didn't look at me. He looked everywhere but. I let the silence stretch thin and silvery. In it, I heard the tines of forks, a drawer sliding in the kitchen, the click of the furnace kicking on. I thought, not for the first time, that some betrayals do not arrive with fireworks. They arrive in little pings on a screen while your mother spoons gravy, like blessing. The truth is, I'd known the difference between our worlds from the start. The first time I saw Nathan's hands, I thought, these hands do not know rust. That isn't a crime, it's just a map. Somewhere along the line, he mistook different for lesser. That is not a map. That's a blindfold. Nathan's phone vibrated again, a short, violent shiver against the wood. He flinched like it bit. "Everything okay, hun?" Aunt Jo asked, sweet and nosy in equal measure. He swallowed. "Fine," he said. He wasn't. I buttered a roll. I did not look at him. I smiled at my mom and told her the roast was perfect, because it was. My dad told a trucker joke that made no sense, and Mason laughed anyway because it always lands better with gravy. The table held. The room held. I held. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to shame a man in front of people who had done nothing but try to love him for my sake. I had already done what needed doing. I pressed my heel into the floor and felt the old wood answer. I belong to this house the way bolts belong to their threads. Tighten and it holds. Strip it and the whole thing rattles apart. Across from me, Nathan finally looked up, his eyes reaching for mine like a man who suddenly realizes the bridge ahead is out and he has already picked up speed. I raised my water glass and took a slow sip. When I set it down, I let the knowledge settle over me like a coat I'd forgotten I owned. I do not need to defend what is good. I only need to refuse what is not. Later, people would ask me why I didn't blow up, why I didn't read the messages out loud, why I didn't make a scene. I would shrug and say the truth. Scenes are for theaters. I prefer outcomes. The phone on the table hummed again. Nathan's jaw clenched hard enough to show a vein in his temple. "Who's calling?" Abby asked, light as a feather, heavy as a stone. Nobody," he lied, and stood up, chair scraping the floor like a wince. "Excuse me." He walked toward the kitchen, the phone to his ear, voice dropping to a hiss I had no interest in translating. Mom leaned close to me, breath warm. "Everything all right, baby?" I pressed my hand over hers. "It will be," I said, and I meant it with my whole body. A breeze lifted the wind chimes. Somewhere down the hall, Nathan's voice flickered, then faltered. The house listened with me. I didn't delete his texts. I didn't need to. I had already forwarded them to the one man Nathan worried about disappointing more than me. I sent them to his father. I'd barely finished chewing my next bite of pot roast when it happened. Nathan's phone lit up again. This time not with a text, but a call. The screen flashed one word that drained the color from his face. Dad. He froze, hand hovering over the table, the way a man freezes when he knows exactly what's waiting on the other end. The whole table kept moving, forks clinking, my mom offering seconds, Aunt Jo talking about her prized tomatoes again. But Nathan had gone still as glass. He hesitated, thumb trembling over the green button. Finally, he answered, "Hey, Dad." His tone was too careful, too tight. He turned slightly away from the table, but Richard Reed's voice was not the kind of voice you could hide from. Even from my seat, I heard the deep, firm rumble of authority and disappointment. "What did you just text your girlfriend, Nathan?" The air in the dining room shifted. It was the kind of silence that has edges. Nathan's eyes flicked toward me. Confusion, accusation, fear, all at once. "Dad, he started, but Richard cut him off. "I'm not asking for a story. I'm asking if you said those things." Nathan swallowed hard. His fingers were white around the phone. "Dad, it's not what it looks like." Across the table, my mom had stopped mid-motion, a serving spoon hovering over mashed potatoes. My father's jaw tightened. Abby's gaze darted from me to Nathan, then back. Even Aunt Jo's mouth hung open. Mid-tomato anecdote. My family didn't know the details yet, but they could feel it. The kind of wrong you don't need words to understand. I kept my face calm, my tone light. "Everything okay, Nathan?" He turned toward me, eyes wide. You sent it to him?" I didn't flinch. "Yes." The sound that came out of him was half laugh, half disbelief. "Carrie, what the hell? That was private." I set my fork down. "You're right. You made it private when you sent it from across the table about the people who cooked you dinner." He pressed a hand to his forehead, whispering, "Oh my God." Richard's voice thundered through the phone. "Are you at Carrie's parents' house right now?" Nathan hesitated. "Yes." "Stay there," Richard said flatly. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. "Dad, that's not—" Click, call ended. The silence after that was louder than the phone had been. Mom's lips parted. "Carrie, what's going on?" I looked at her, the kind of look that says, "I wish I didn't have to explain this." "Nathan," I said quietly, "would you like to tell them, or should I?" His eyes darted between all of us, trapped. Then the words burst out. "She screenshotted my messages to my dad." My dad frowned. "What messages?" Nathan's voice cracked. I just said something stupid, okay? I didn't mean it." My mom leaned forward, brows knit. "What did you say, sweetheart?" He looked down. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," my father said firmly. "If you insulted my wife's cooking, it matters." The room broke into tiny sounds. A chair creak, a spoon hitting china, my sister's small gasp. Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. "I said your family was low class." Aunt Jo muttered, "Well, he got that right. Class is something you earn, not something you buy." Mom's hand covered her mouth. I saw the hurt ripple through her eyes before she blinked it away. My father just stared at Nathan like he was a bad noise in an otherwise decent song. Nathan reached across the table, desperate. "I didn't mean it like that, Mrs. Thompson. I swear, it was just a joke." My mom's voice was steady but soft. "That wasn't a joke, dear. That was cruelty, pretending to be clever." He deflated. I spoke quietly, not for show, but because rage whispered sharper than it shouted. "You sat at my mother's table, Nathan. You ate her food, you smiled at her face, and then you mocked her from your phone. I could have yelled. I could have embarrassed you right then and there, but instead I thought maybe your father should see who he raised." He rubbed his temple. "Carrie, you shouldn't have gone behind my back." "No," I said. "You went behind mine when you sent that text." No one spoke after that. Just the ticking of the old wall clock and the slow, uneven breaths of a man who'd run out of excuses. 15 minutes later, a car engine rumbled in the driveway. Headlights cut across the lace curtains. My dad stood first. "Guess that's your ride, son." Nathan's eyes widened. "He's actually here?" I met his gaze. "He said 40 minutes. "Your family's insane," he muttered under his breath. I smiled faintly. "No, just accountable." He didn't reply. The color in his face had gone pale, like the life was draining from his confidence with every passing second. We waited in silence. You could feel it. The hum of something irreversible coming closer. My mom quietly began gathering plates, her hands shaking slightly, whispering to no one, "I just wanted a nice dinner." Dad took her hand. "You did, hun. You made one." Outside, a car door slammed. The sound was final, heavy. The front doorbell rang. A single, calm chime. Dad went to answer it. A moment later, he stepped aside, and there stood Richard Reed, Nathan's father, tall, composed, his expression carved from stone. He wore business casual like a uniform, but his eyes were sharp with fury. He extended a hand to my father. "Mr. Thompson, I'm terribly sorry for this intrusion." Dad shook his hand slowly. "Come in." Richard stepped into the dining room, gaze moving from me to Nathan, and finally settling on my mother. He took in the food, the table, the awkward, suspended air. When he spoke, it was quiet. Too quiet. "Are the texts real, Nathan?" Nathan didn't answer. Richard's voice hardened. "Answer me." Nathan nodded once. "Yes." Richard closed his eyes for half a second. "Do you understand what you've done?" Nathan stammered. "Dad, it was a joke. I was uncomfortable." Richard cut him off. "Being uncomfortable doesn't excuse being cruel." My mother stood. "Mr. Reed, you don't have to—" He turned to her immediately. "Ma'am, I do. I'm deeply sorry for my son's behavior. You opened your home to him, cooked for him, and he repaid you with disrespect. That's on me as much as him." Mom's eyes softened despite herself. "You don't need to apologize for someone else's manners." Richard shook his head. "When you raise someone, you take responsibility for how they behave in the world. I failed to teach my son gratitude. That's my burden." Nathan whispered, "Dad, please, not here." Richard ignored him. "You will apologize, right now, to every person in this room." Nathan's eyes flicked to me, to my family. His face flushed red. He stood slowly, shoulders hunched. "I am sorry," he muttered. Richard's brow furrowed. Louder. Nathan's voice cracked. "I'm sorry for what I said. It was wrong. I was stupid." He turned to my mom. "Your dinner was wonderful, ma'am. You didn't deserve that." To my dad. "Sir, I'm sorry for disrespecting your home." To Aunt Jo. "And, your tomatoes sound great." Even she didn't smile. When he finally looked at me, there was a flicker of something. Regret, maybe. But I wasn't ready to interpret it. "Carrie," he said softly, "I really am sorry." I nodded once. "I believe you're sorry you got caught." Richard exhaled, long and heavy. "That'll be all, Nathan. Get your coat." Nathan hesitated. "Can we please talk later?" I looked at him, the man who'd once called me real, like it was a compliment. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "You've already told me what you think of me and my family. I just finally let your father hear it too." He swallowed, said nothing, and followed Richard out the door. The air stayed thick for a moment after they left. Then Aunt Jo spoke, breaking the spell. "Well," she said, half to herself, "these tomatoes just won't sound as exciting after that." My dad barked a single laugh. Mom shook her head, half smiling, half heartbroken. She leaned toward me, her voice small but proud. "You didn't shout. You didn't lose your temper. You did what was right." I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. Just calm, the way the sky feels after a storm, but before the sun remembers to come back out. I excused myself and walked to the window. Outside, Richard's car headlights faded down the road, taking with them the man who'd insulted everything I came from. I breathed in the smell of pot roast and cooling gravy, the scent of my mother's pride. Still here, still warm. When a man disrespects your family, I thought, watching the night settle, he doesn't just lose your love, he loses his mask. Richard Reed came back the next afternoon. Not in a rush, not in anger, in something worse. Deliberation. It was almost 5 when his black Lexus pulled into my parents' gravel driveway. The sound of tires on stone made everyone glance toward the window. Dad was in his recliner, still pretending to read a magazine. Mom froze mid-fold with a towel in her hands. She looked at me. Not afraid, just curious, wary. "You expecting company?" she asked. I wiped my hands on my jeans. Not exactly. By the time I opened the door, Richard was already halfway up the porch steps. Dressed in a gray jacket, no tie, but the weight of authority came in with him like weather. "Carrie," he greeted, his tone even but heavy. "May I come in?" I nodded, stepped aside. "Of course." Inside, my father stood. "Mr. Reed." Richard extended his hand. "Mr. Thompson, I owe you and your wife an apology for last night." Mom shook her head, already uncomfortable with the formality. "You don't need to apologize again, sir. I can tell you meant it the first time." He smiled faintly, respectful. "That may be true, ma'am, but some things deserve repetition, if only to make sure they stick." He turned to me. "May I sit?" "Please." He sat at the edge of our couch, posture so upright it looked painful. For a long moment he didn't say anything, just studied the old photographs lining the mantel. My brother's graduation, my parents' wedding picture, me at 12 with my first truck. Finally, he exhaled through his nose. "I wanted to thank you." "Me?" "For how you handled it. You didn't scream. You didn't humiliate my son in front of anyone. You just let the truth do the talking." I shrugged. My mom taught me better than to yell at dinner. That drew a small laugh from him, brief but real. She raised you well. He looked toward the kitchen, where Mom was pretending to fuss with dishes just to listen. You both did, he added, louder, and my mom's hands paused for half a second over the sink. Then his voice dropped, quiet and personal. I've spent my whole life in boardrooms full of men who think status excuses bad manners. I thought I'd raise mine differently. Turns out he learned by watching me, not listening to me. I watched him carefully. There was guilt there, but also sincerity. You did what a good father does. You showed up. He nodded, thoughtful. Showing up is the bare minimum, Carrie. Respecting people, that's the work. He leaned forward. Nathan's been trying to reach you. I know. He says he wants to apologize again. Properly this time. I looked down at my hands, rough from work, black at the edges of the nails. He already did, in front of everyone. That was enough. Richard studied me, then nodded slowly, like he was cataloging the difference between a woman his son dated and a woman who had already learned how to survive disappointment. I won't push it, he said. You don't owe him your time. We sat in silence for a bit. The house creaked, settling around us like an old friend who knew every story by heart. Then Richard spoke again, softer. Your mother's dinner was remarkable. Reminded me of my own mother's Sunday pot roast. Haven't tasted something that honest in years. I smiled. You should tell her that. She pretends she doesn't care about compliments, but she'll bring it up for the next 5 holidays. He actually laughed this time. Duly noted. Mom peeked from the kitchen. Mr. Reed, would you like a cup of coffee? Only if you'll call me Richard, he said, smiling with more warmth than I'd seen last night. Then coffee it is, Richard, she said, already reaching for mugs. Dad joined her, and within a few minutes, the tension had thinned to something almost comfortable. The scent of coffee filled the room, familiar, grounding. Richard took a sip and looked around again, eyes catching on a framed cross-stitch above the mantel. Family isn't about who you share blood with, it's who you'd bleed for. He read it aloud quietly. That's a good motto. Mom made that when I was in high school, I said. She said every house should hang its values where guests can see them. Richard's expression softened. Maybe I should have done the same. We talked for nearly an hour, not about Nathan, about work, the world, what it means to build something that lasts. He told me about growing up with nothing, about how success had changed the way his family spoke, but not always the way they listened. I forgot, he said finally, that some people still mean the words they say. Before he left, he stood at the doorway, the late sun cutting across his shoulder. Carrie, I'm not sure you'll believe this, but you've done my son a favor. He needed to learn humility. I wasn't the one who could teach him. I met his gaze. Maybe he'll learn. Or maybe he'll just remember this as the day he lost something that couldn't be bought. Richard nodded once, gravely. Either way, lesson learned. He offered his hand again. I took it. His grip was firm, not in dominance, but respect. Take care of yourself, Carrie, he said. You too, Richard. He walked out into the late afternoon light, the gravel crunching under his polished shoes. Mom appeared behind me, wiping her hands on a towel. You know, she said softly, I don't think I've ever seen a man like that look so small and human at the same time. Dad nodded from the doorway. That's what honesty does to people. Shrinks the lies, leaves room for truth. I smiled faintly, looking out after the retreating car. He's right, though, about his son. It wasn't about money. It was about manners. Aunt Jo, who had somehow appeared with a jar of jam in her hands, muttered, and tomatoes. Manners and tomatoes. That's what life's made of. We all laughed, just a little, enough to loosen the ache in our chests. As the day dimmed, I walked out to my truck, sat in the driver's seat, and looked at the screenshots still saved in my gallery, each one small, digital proof of who Nathan really was when he thought no one was watching. I didn't delete them, not yet, not out of spite, out of clarity. He wanted forgiveness, I thought, watching the last streak of daylight fade across the hood of my truck. But I wanted truth, and they don't live in the same room. The days after that dinner felt strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that hums under your ribs, waiting for something else to break. Nathan tried reaching out 3 times that week. First, a text. Can we please talk? I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then another. I was nervous. I felt out of place. And finally, a longer one, sent late at night. You made me feel small. You didn't have to go to my father. That was cruel, Carrie. I read them all. I didn't reply. When someone shows you who they are, you don't argue with them. You let them be exactly that. Mom asked once, gently, if I'd heard from him. I told her yes. She didn't ask what he said. She just nodded and went back to peeling apples. That was our language. Silence that understood more than words ever could. 3 days later, a delivery truck pulled up outside the house. The man carried a bouquet big enough to belong in a wedding. White roses, lilies, and a silver card tucked among them. Mom opened it. "From Nathan," she said quietly, then read aloud. "I'm deeply sorry for my words. Please let Carrie know I'd do anything to make it right." She looked at me. "What do you want me to do with them?" "Keep them," I said, "or give them away. They're yours now." She smiled a little. "He's got good taste, I'll give him that." "He had everything but character," I said. "That part can't be bought." At work, the guys didn't know the details, but they could tell something was off. I'd crawl under a truck, wrench in hand, and lose myself in the rhythm. Twist, pull, tighten, move. Machines make sense. People don't. It was Thursday afternoon when my coworker Tony walked over, wiping his hands. "Hey, Carrie, there's someone asking for you out front." I slid out from under the chassis. "Customer?" He shook his head. "Nah, dressed too clean for that. He looks nervous." My stomach sank before I even saw him. Nathan stood just inside the bay door, completely out of place. Polished shoes on oil-stained concrete. Expensive watch, glinting under fluorescent light. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Carrie," he started, voice soft, almost pleading. "Please, 5 minutes." "Make it quick," I said. He exhaled, relieved that I hadn't walked away. I wanted to explain." "You already did," I said, "with every text you sent." "I didn't mean it." "You meant it enough to type it, to send it, to sit there smiling at my mom while you did it." He rubbed his neck. "I was uncomfortable, okay? I panicked. Your family was real," I cut in. "Loud, honest, that scares you?" He dropped his hand. "You're twisting this." "No," I said evenly. "You did the twisting. I'm just holding up the rope." He sighed, his voice breaking. "Carrie, I made a mistake. I lost my temper. I shook my head. "No, Nathan, you didn't lose your temper. You lost your mask." He went silent. The echo of a wrench dropping from someone's workstation filled the bay. Finally, he asked, "Is there anything I can do to fix this?" "Yeah," I said. "Respect my decision and leave me alone." He stood there for another heartbeat, looking at me like he was memorizing what regret felt like. Then he nodded. "I hope someday you'll forgive me." "I already did," I said. "That's why I'm not letting you back in." He left. For weeks, I didn't hear from him again. The silence stopped humming. It became clean. At night, I sat with a mug of coffee on my porch, the autumn air cutting cold against my face. Sometimes I'd scroll past those screenshots, each one a small bruise on my phone screen, and I'd think about how calm I'd felt pressing send. That calm wasn't revenge, it was clarity. Then, 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call. The name made me pause before answering. Richard Reed. "Carrie?" His voice came through steady as ever. "Would you have coffee with me?" Sure, why?" "I owe you a proper thank you." We met at a small cafe downtown. He was already there when I arrived, 2 mugs of coffee steaming on the table. "Thought I'd save you the wait," he said. We sat for nearly an hour. He didn't talk about Nathan much. Instead, he asked about me, my work, my plans, my family. He said I reminded him of his sister, the one who'd stayed grounded no matter how high life tried to lift her. "Do you know what I've realized?" he said finally, stirring his coffee. "Class isn't about income. It's about intention. You can't fake kindness. You can only fake status." I nodded. "Your son's still young. Maybe he'll learn that someday." He gave a half smile. "If he does, it'll be because of you." When we stood to leave, he offered his hand. "You did the right thing, Carrie. Most people would have just let resentment build until it poisoned them. You chose truth." "I wasn't trying to teach a lesson," I said. "I was protecting my family." "Same thing sometimes," he said quietly. He left with a small wave. That night, I sat in my truck outside the shop long after closing. I scrolled back to those old screenshots one last time, thumb hovering over the delete button. But I didn't press it. Not yet. Not because I was angry, because I wanted the reminder. A reminder that I'd stood up, calmly and without cruelty, for the people who gave me everything I have. For the kind of love that doesn't come with silver cutlery or fine wine, just respect, passed down like a recipe. I leaned back in the seat and watched the dusk settle over the town. The garage lights flickered out, one by one. He mistook my silence for weakness, I whispered to no one. That was his biggest mistake. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. It's been a 1.5 years since that dinner. The screenshots are still in my phone, buried in a folder I almost never open. I keep them not out of bitterness, but because they remind me of something important. That sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the loudest kind of strength. Life got quieter after Nathan. Easier, too. The kind of easies that doesn't make you question every silence. Work stayed steady. My family stayed loud, messy, and perfect in their imperfection. Mom's still trying to get her pot roast just right, even though we all know she nailed it years ago. Dad still watches the same football reruns like the score might change. And me? I started breathing again. Then, a few months ago, I met Alex. He's a high school teacher, the kind who remembers his students' birthdays and carries a thermos everywhere because he hates buying coffee on principle. He grew up an hour outside of town, small farm, 2 younger sisters, both nurses. The first time we talked, he asked what I did for a living, and when I told him, he smiled. "That's real work," he said. "You must be good with your hands." It wasn't a line, he meant it. We took things slow. No games, no pretending. He didn't try to impress me with fancy dinners. He offered to help me change a carburetor gasket on a Saturday. I said no, mostly because I wanted to see how he handled rejection. He laughed, said fair, and handed me a sandwich instead. 3 months later, I brought him home to meet my family. Mom made her pot roast, of course. Dad cleaned the porch. Abby brought dessert. Alex showed up with flowers from a roadside stand and a bottle of red that cost less than $10. My mom loved him immediately. He helped her in the kitchen without being asked, told my dad he liked his recliner because it looked broken in by wisdom, and asked Aunt Jo about her tomatoes with genuine interest. Halfway through dinner, my mom caught my eye from across the table. She smiled that small, knowing smile mothers have when they finally see their child happy again. After everyone left the table, she pulled me aside, her hands still damp from the dishes. "I like him," she said. "He doesn't just see you. He fits here. That's rare." I nodded, feeling the truth of it deep in my chest. "Yeah," I said. "It is." That night, when Alex and I left, I glanced back through the kitchen window. Mom was laughing. Dad was humming along to some old country song. The house looked the same as it always had. Shalom, warm, alive. On the drive home, Alex reached for my hand. "Your family's great," he said. "I can see where you get your fire." I smiled. "They'd say it's from Mom's side." He squeezed my hand. "Well, wherever it comes from, don't lose it." The next week, while grabbing groceries, I saw a familiar face in the aisle. Nathan. He looked almost the same, just a little older around the eyes. He was with someone, a woman in a cream blazer, perfectly styled, perfectly composed. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm lightly. He saw me before I could decide what to do. For a heartbeat, our eyes met. He froze, then gave a small, polite nod. I nodded back and pushed my cart past him. At the register, as I was unloading items, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Thank you for not making that awkward, and thank you for teaching me something important. I hope you're happy." I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pity, just gratitude. That I'd learned the kind of lesson that only heartbreak teaches right. When I got home, Alex was there, sitting on my porch, a bag of groceries by his feet. "You beat me to it," he said with a grin. "Guess we're both domestic now," I teased. He laughed, stood, and kissed my forehead, the kind of kiss that doesn't ask for anything in return. We unpacked the groceries together. He chopped onions while I started the pot roast. The smell filled the kitchen, the same way it had filled my childhood, the same way it filled the air the night everything broke. Mom always said the secret to a good roast wasn't the seasoning, it was the patience. "You can't rush tenderness," she'd tell me. "It only comes when it's ready." I thought about that as I stirred the gravy. Maybe that's true for love, too. You can't force it to fit into places where respect doesn't exist. When dinner was ready, we sat on the couch with our plates and a cheap bottle of wine. Alex took a bite and smiled. "This is incredible." I laughed. "Don't tell my mom. She'll say I finally got it right." He looked at me, eyes soft. "You already did." Later that night, after he left, I walked out to my truck. I scrolled through my phone until I found that folder again. The screenshots. My thumb hovered over them, then I finally pressed delete. All of them, gone. Not because I forgot, because I'd learned. I leaned against the hood and watched the stars come out, slow and steady. Respect, I whispered to the night, isn't about money or manners. It's about heart. And that's the thing I'll never settle for less than again. I smiled, turned toward the house, where my family's laughter still echoed faintly through the window. That's where I belong, where truth lives, where kindness costs nothing, where love doesn't need to prove itself in text messages. It shows up, sits down, and says grace.